The rain-slicked alleyway in the forgotten corner of Milford reeked of damp concrete and distant thunder, the kind of night where shadows clung like old regrets. Under a flickering street lamp, a young woman named Emily Harper crouched low, her coat torn at the sleeves from the scuffle. She wasn't much over 25, with wide eyes that held the quiet fire of someone who'd seen too much too soon. In her arms, trembling against her chest, was a scruffy mutt, a loyal stray that had wandered into her life months ago, its fur matted and one ear notched from some forgotten fight. But tonight that dog wasn't just any stray, it belonged to him, the biker she'd glimpsed earlier at the edge of town. The attackers, 3 shadows in hoodies, their faces twisted by the dim light, had come out of nowhere. One of them, the leader with a scar snaking down his cheek, had kicked at the dog first, laughing as it yelped and tried to flee. "Filthy mutt!" he'd snarled, his boot connecting with ribs that cracked like dry twigs. Emily had been passing by on her way home from the late shift at the diner, her feet aching in worn sneakers when she saw it. Something snapped in her then, a raw, unfiltered rage born from her own buried pains. Her father had been like that dog once, kicked around by life until he couldn't get up. She couldn't just walk away. "Leave it alone!" Emily's voice cut through the rain, sharp and unyielding. She dropped her bag and lunged forward, scooping the dog into her arms, just as the leader's knife flashed. The blade was cheap, serrated, glinting like a promise of regret. He swung wild, but she twisted, shielding the animal with her body. The first strike grazed her side, tearing fabric and flesh in a hot line of pain. She gasped, but held on, the dog's whimpers vibrating against her chest like a heartbeat. The second man grabbed her hair, yanking her back. "Mind your business, bitch," he growled, his breath sour with cheap whiskey. Emily kicked out, her heel connecting with his knee, but it only enraged them more. The knife came again, once, twice, 3 times, each thrust a blur of silver and shadow. Blood bloomed on her shirt, warm and sticky, soaking through to her skin. The 4th stab caught her in the shoulder, forcing a cry from her lips that echoed off the brick walls. She staggered, vision blurring, but refused to let go. The dog licked her face, its tongue rough against the salt of her tears. 5 strikes in all, each one a testament to her stubborn heart. The attackers paused, surprised by her defiance, and in that moment of hesitation, headlights pierced the alley like judgment. From the mouth of the street, a single motorcycle roared to life, its engine a thunderous growl that drowned the rain. The rider, Jacob Thorne, a weathered man in his late 40s with tattoos mapping old wars across his knuckles, had been nursing a beer at the roadside bar when he'd heard the commotion. His dog, Duke, had slipped its leash earlier that evening, chasing shadows into the night. Jacob had searched half the town, his mind heavy with the ghosts of promises he'd made and broken. Duke wasn't just a pet, he was the last tether to his late brother, who'd gifted the pup before a deployment that ended in silence. Losing him now felt like losing everything again. Jacob gunned the throttle, his leather jacket slick with rain as he barreled toward the fray. The attackers scattered like rats at the sight of him, a lone biker with eyes like forged steel, his presence alone a warning. He skidded to a halt, boots hitting pavement, and dismounted in one fluid motion. "What the hell happened here?" His voice was gravel, laced with the quiet fury of a man who'd stared down worse. Emily slumped against the wall, clutching Duke tighter, her breaths coming in ragged bursts. Blood pooled at her feet, mixing with the puddles, but her gaze met Jacob's without flinching. They were hurting him," she whispered, nodding to the dog. Duke whined, nuzzling her neck as if sensing her sacrifice. Jacob knelt beside her, his calloused hands gentle as he assessed the damage. The wounds were deep, jagged lines that spoke of cruelty, but she was alive, fierce, unbroken. He shrugged off his jacket, pressing it against the worst of the bleeding. "You're a fool for stepping in," he said, but there was no judgment, only a flicker of respect in his eyes. A brave one, though. Sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer, but Jacob's mind raced ahead. This woman, this stranger, had defended what was his with her own blood. In the biker world he knew, the Iron Vow Club, a brotherhood forged in the fires of lost battles, such loyalty wasn't taken lightly. He'd walked away from the club years ago, after the accident that claimed his brother's life and left him scarred inside and out, vowed to go it alone, to bury the promises under miles of open road. But now, staring at Emily's pale face, he felt the old oath stir, protect your own, no matter the cost. As paramedics arrived, lights flashing like accusations, Jacob helped her onto the stretcher. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice low over the chaos. "Emily," she murmured, her hand still stroking Duke's fur. "And you?" "Jacob." He squeezed her arm lightly. "You saved him. That means something." In the hospital room that followed, sterile white walls closing in like a cage, Emily lay bandaged and exhausted. The doctor had stitched her up. 5 wounds, they said, each one a miracle she hadn't lost more blood. Duke curled at her feet, a warm weight against the cold linoleum. Jacob paced the hallway outside, phone in hand, staring at the contact he'd sworn never to use again. Vow Master, Iron Club. He'd made a promise to his brother once, under the desert sun, to always have his back, to build a family not of blood, but of unbreakable bonds. The club had been that family, until guilt fractured it. But Emily's act, defending the innocent without hesitation, echoed that vow louder than any engine roar. By dawn, as the first light crept through the blinds, Jacob hit dial. "It's me," he said when the voice answered. "We ride for her." Word spread like wildfire through the network of roads and bars that bound the Iron Vow. Calls went out in the dead of night, from dusty garages to rain-lashed highways. One by one, engines fired up, Harleys and choppers, their chrome gleaming under streetlights. By sunrise, they gathered at the club's old rendezvous point on the outskirts of Milford. 99 riders strong, vests patched with the Iron Fist emblem, faces set in quiet determination. Jacob led them, Duke in a sidecar rigged just for him, toward the hospital where Emily waited, unaware that her selfless stand had awakened a legion. The convoy rolled out as one, a river of leather and steel cutting through the morning mist. Horns blared in salute, not of vengeance but of honor. Emily, peering from her window as they arrived, felt a tear trace her cheek. In a world that had kicked her down too many times, this was redemption's roar, a promise fulfilled, binding strangers into something eternal. The morning sun crested the horizon like a hesitant witness, casting long shadows across the hospital parking lot in Milford. The air hummed with the low rumble of engines idling, a symphony of chrome and exhaust that turned heads from every window. 99 motorcycles formed a semicircle around the entrance, their riders dismounted and standing at attention, leather vests bearing the Iron Fist patch, faces etched with the quiet resolve of men who'd ridden through storms both literal and otherwise. Jacob Thorne stood at the forefront, his boots planted firm on the asphalt. Duke's sidecar empty now as the dog dozed inside the hospital, a guardian at Emily's side. Inside room 214, Emily Harper shifted against the crisp sheets, her bandaged shoulder throbbing with each breath. The IV drip beeped steadily, a mechanical lullaby in the sterile quiet. She'd refused the pain meds at first, wanting her mind clear, but the ache had won out. Through the half-open blinds, she watched the assembly below, her heart pounding in rhythm with the distant growl. Who were they? Strangers on steel horses, gathered like sentinels for a cause she couldn't fathom. Jacob's face caught her eye. He nodded up at her window, a silent acknowledgement that bridged the gap between them. A nurse poked her head in, her scrubs rustling softly. "You've got visitors outside, hun. Whole lot of 'em. You expecting family?" Emily managed a weak smile, her voice hoarse. Not exactly, just someone I met last night. The nurse raised an eyebrow but didn't press. Well, that gentleman's been pacing the hall like a caged wolf. Name's Jacob, says he's here for you. Before Emily could respond, a soft knock echoed. Jacob entered, filling the doorway with his broad frame, the scent of rain-washed leather trailing him. He carried a paper cup of coffee, steam curling like unspoken words. Brought you this. Hospital brew's better than nothing. She sat up straighter. Wincing as the movement tugged at her stitches, Duke lifted his head from the foot of the bed, tail thumping lazily. Those people out there, they're with you. Jacob set the cup on the bedside table and pulled up a chair, his knees creaking as he sat. The room felt smaller with him in it, charged with the weight of what she'd done and what it had unleashed. Iron Vow Club, my old crew. Haven't ridden with them in years. His eyes, dark and steady, met hers. But you changed that. Defending Duke like that. It hit me hard. Reminded me of promises I buried under the road. Emily's fingers traced the edge of the blanket, the fabric rough against her skin. She'd always been the fixer in her life, the one who patched up strays, both animal and human. After her own family splintered, her mother gone too early, her father lost to the bottle and bad choices. It wasn't a big deal, she said, though the lie tasted bitter. I couldn't just watch. That dog. He looked at me like he trusted I'd help. Jacob leaned forward, elbows on his knees. It's a big deal to us, to me. Duke was my brother's. Last thing he left me before. Well, before he didn't come back. His voice trailed, the words heavy with the sand and silence of distant sands. The club had formed in the aftermath of those losses. Veterans like him, binding wounds with oaths sworn over flickering campfires. We vow to protect our own, blood or not. You stepped in for him, so now you're one of us. Outside, the riders shifted, their murmurs carrying faintly through the glass. One by one, they placed small tokens at the hospital entrance, a cluster of wildflowers picked from the roadside, a handmade patch embroidered with the iron fist, even a tiny leather collar for Duke, studded with silver rivets that caught the light. It wasn't showy, it was deliberate, a ritual of inclusion born from nights when the world had turned its back on them. Emily glanced out again, the scene blurring through unshed tears. I don't even know you. Why would they do this for a stranger? Because loyalty doesn't ask for introductions. Jacob's hand rested lightly on the bedrail, close but not touching. I called the vowmaster at dawn, told him what happened. By the time the sun hit the horizon, they were rolling in from every direction. Guys from the coast, the mountains, even the old-timers who'd hung up their helmets. 99 of us, plus me makes 100. We're here to make sure those cowards who hurt you don't walk free. The door creaked open wider as a doctor entered, chart in hand. He was a middle-aged man with wire-rimmed glasses, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity at the gathering below. Miss Harper, you're stable, but we need to talk about the police report. Those injuries, they suggest a serious altercation. Have you remembered anything else about the attackers? Emily hesitated, the memory flashing, the scar on the leader's cheek, the whiskey breath, the glint of the blade. Just shadows, she said softly. But they won't stop, not if they're the type to pick on the helpless. The doctor nodded, jotting notes. We'll coordinate with authorities. In the meantime, rest. He glanced at Jacob. And keep the parade outside from causing a scene. As he left, Jacob's phone buzzed, a text from the club's enforcer, a burly veteran named Ryan, confirming they'd tracked leads on the attackers through back channels, the kind of network that bypassed red tape. No vengeance, just truth. Jacob pocketed it, his jaw set. We don't go vigilante, that's not our code, but we'll stand with you, make sure justice sticks. The law's got holes, we fill 'em with honor. Emily reached out, her hand brushing Duke's fur for comfort. The dog leaned into her, warm and unwavering. For the first time since the alley she felt anchored, not adrift in a life of quiet struggles, but part of something larger. "What now?" she asked, her voice gaining strength. Jacob stood, the chair scraping softly. "Now we ride when you're ready, but first the club's throwing a quiet welcome at the old barn on Route 17 tonight. Nothing fancy, just stories, a fire, and brothers who have your back." He paused at the door, turning back. "You in?" She nodded, a spark igniting in her chest. The convoy below revved in unison as if sensing it, a chorus that vibrated through the walls. Outside, the mist lifted, revealing the open road ahead, a path woven from scars and second chances. As the afternoon wore on, whispers spread through Milford. Folks at the diner where Emily worked exchanged glances over coffee mugs, piecing together the tale of the woman who'd taken blows for a biker's dog. The sheriff's office stirred too, a deputy named Lucas noting the club's arrival in his log, not as a threat but as allies in a town weary of unchecked shadows. By evening, Emily was discharged, her steps tentative but determined. Jacob waited with Duke, the sidecar gleaming under the lot's floodlights. The riders formed a loose honor guard as she mounted a spare bike behind him, her arms wrapping around his waist for balance. The engine purred to life, and they led the pack out, tires humming against pavement slick with fading rain. The barn loomed on the outskirts, its weathered timbers a sanctuary under the stars. Lanterns flickered, casting golden pools where the club gathered, meats grilling on open flames, the sizzle mingling with laughter and low tales of roads travelled. Ryan clapped Jacob on the back, his grin wide. "She's got fire, brother, reminds me of the old days." Emily dismounted, the ground solid beneath her, Duke trotting at her heels. Faces turned, nods of welcome rippling through the crowd. No speeches, just the warmth of hands extended, stories shared around the fire. One rider, an elder named Samuel, handed her a vest, her name stitched fresh on the back. "Earned it," he said simply. As flames danced, casting shadows that danced like freed ghosts, Emily felt the weight lift. This wasn't pity. It was promise, a vow renewed in the glow of embers, binding her to a family forged in the crucible of loyalty. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The fire crackled in the heart of the old barn, its flames licking at the night like tongues of forgotten oaths. Shadows played across the weathered beams, where lanterns hung from rusted chains, swaying gently in the draught from open doors. The air was thick with the scent of charred oak and sizzling venison, mingling with the faint tang of motor oil that clung to every vest and boot. Emily Harper stood at the edge of the circle, the new leather vest heavy on her shoulders, its stitches pulling at her bandages like a reminder of the price paid. Duke sat at her feet, his notched ear twitching at the low hum of voices, stories of dusty trails and midnight runs, each tale a thread in the tapestry of the Iron Vow Club. Jacob Thorne leaned against a hay bale nearby, his silhouette sharp against the glow, nursing a bottle of water instead of the whiskey that passed among the others. His eyes, shadowed by the brim of his cap, flicked toward Emily every few moments, watching as she navigated the sea of faces. Ryan, the enforcer with arms like coiled ropes, clapped her on the good shoulder, his laugh booming. "You got more grit than half these road dogs combined. Tell us, what made you charge in like that? Alley full of rain and regret, and you pick a fight with knives?" Emily hesitated, the fire's warmth chasing the chill from her bones. She wasn't used to this, being seen, her choices laid bare like an open throttle. Grew up watching my dad take hits he didn't deserve, she said finally, her voice steady despite the ache in her side. Strays like Duke. They don't fight back. Someone has to. The group nodded, murmurs rippling like engines sinking up. Samuel, the elder with silver threading his beard, passed her a skewer of meat, his eyes crinkling. That's the vow right there. We don't choose the weak. We choose to stand for 'em. As the night deepened, the gathering shifted. Guitars strummed soft melodies under the stars, chords weaving through confessions of lost brothers and roads not taken. Jacob pulled Emily aside to a quieter corner where the barn's wall met the cool grass outside. Moonlight filtered through cracks in the tin roof, painting silver streaks on the ground. "This isn't just a pat on the back," he said, his tone low, gravelly with the weight of unspoken history. "Those shadows in the alley, they're tied to something bigger. Word from the club's eyes, they're runners for a crew shaking down the outskirts. Small-time extortion, but it festers. Sheriff turns a blind eye 'cause half the town's payroll lines their pockets." Emily's breath caught, the night's peace fracturing like glass under boot. She pressed a hand to her bandaged shoulder, the fabric stiff with dried sweat. "So they come after me next? Or you?" "Not if we move right." Jacob's gaze hardened, the firelight catching the tattoos on his knuckles, faded ink of an iron fist clenched around a broken chain. He'd walked from the club after his brother's death, the guilt a shadow that rode shotgun on every mile. A promise shattered, to bring him home safe. But Emily's stand had cracked that isolation, stirring the old code like dust from a long-sealed garage. "We don't hunt, we witness. Tomorrow, we ride to the station, lay out what we know, make 'em see the truth without spilling blood." She nodded, but doubt flickered in her eyes, sharp as the blade that had marked her. The hospital discharge papers crinkled in her pocket. A clean bill, but the scars would whisper for years. "I've trusted the law before. It buried my dad in paperwork while he drowned." Her voice trailed, the vulnerability raw, exposed like wiring under rain. Jacob placed a hand on her arm, light as a promise. "Then we make it unburiable. The club's got stories, alibis, routes that map the underbelly. Ryan's already sketching timelines. Sightings of those hoods at the old mill, ties to a fence named Victor Kane, who peddles trouble from the border towns." The name hung heavy. Victor was a ghost from Jacob's past, a war buddy turned opportunist after the Sands claimed too many. No vengeance but closure, a vow to honor the fallen by shielding the living. Dawn crept in slow, painting the horizon in bruised purples as the convoy reformed. 100 riders now, including a few late arrivals who'd burned rubber from distant ridges, Harleys and Customs rumbling in unison, exhaust curling like morning fog. Emily rode pillion behind Jacob, her arms secure around him, the wind whipping her hair as they cut toward Milford's core. Duke rode in the sidecar, ears flapping, a furry sentinel against the blur of passing pines. The town awoke to the thunder, curtains twitching, faces peering from porches as the pack rolled into the sheriff's lot. A respectful halt, engines cutting off in a cascading silence. Sheriff Harlan Brooks met them at the steps, his badge glinting under the overcast sky, mustache twitching like a barometer of unease. He was a broad man in his 50s, uniform starched, but eyes weary from years of compromises. "Thorne," he greeted, voice clipped. "Heard about your parade. This about the girl?" Jacob dismounted, helping Emily down with a steadying hand. The riders fanned out, not crowding, but present, a wall of leather and resolve. "About justice, Harlan. Emily here took 5 hits shielding my dog from your shadows. We got names, routes, Victor Kane's crew. You gonna log it proper, or let it slide like the mill jobs?" The sheriff's jaw tightened, glancing at the assembly. Whispers of corruption had dogged his office, tips ignored, reports vanishing into drawers. Emily stepped forward, her chin lifted despite the pull of stitches. I saw the scar on the leader's face, whiskey breath, They didn't just pick a fight, they prey on the alone. Her words carried clear over the lot's hush, stirring nods from the riders. Brooks rubbed his neck, the weight of eyes upon him like chains. Kane's slippery, no hard proof. But Jacob slid a folder from his saddlebag. Sketches, timestamps from Club Scouts, even a grainy photo from a bar cam. Ryan had pieced it overnight, honorable work born of networks that spanned forgotten highways. "Fine," the sheriff relented, taking the file. "I'll pull 'em in, but keep your pack leashed, Thorne. No vigilante sunrises." It wasn't full surrender, but a crack in the facade, a moral pivot forced by the unyielding stand of strangers turned kin. As the riders revved to life, dispersing in pairs toward coffee joints and back roads, Emily lingered with Jacob. The sun broke through, warming the pavement. "You think it'll stick?" she asked, Duke nuzzling her leg. "It will if we hold the line." His smile was rare, cracking the gravel, a glimpse of the man beneath the scars. The road ahead twisted, laced with dilemmas yet to unfold. But in that moment, the vow pulsed alive, loyalty as armor, redemption in the ride. Back at the barn by midday, the group debriefed over maps spread on crates, plotting watches without a word of force. Emily traced a route with her finger, her place secured not by blood, but by the fire she'd kindled. Shadows loomed, Kane's reach, the sheriff's fragile word. But the club stood firm, a family reforged in the quiet roar of honor. The afternoon sun dipped low, casting golden hues through the barn's slats as plans solidified. Samuel shared a tale of a similar stand years back, when the club had shielded a widow from land grabbers, their presence alone turning the tide. Laughter followed, easing the tension, but Jacob's mind raced ahead, to the mill where Kane's crew lurked, to the ethical tightrope of truth over fists. Emily caught his eye across the fire pit, now banked to embers. Gratitude swelled, unspoken, binding them tighter than any oath. In the world's cynicism, this was the counterpoint. Actions silent, consequences thunderous. As engines fired sporadically, riders heading out on reconnaissance, she knew the ride had only begun, a journey of lealdad that would test them all. The dust from the reconnaissance rides settled like a veil over the barn as twilight bled into the sky, painting the horizon in strokes of amber and indigo. Emily Harper leaned against the rough-hewn railing, her bandaged shoulder a dull throb beneath the fresh vest. The iron fist emblem catching the last rays like a badge of quiet defiance. Duke paced at her feet, his paws stirring the earth, ears perked toward the distant hum of returning engines. The air carried the sharp bite of pine from the surrounding woods, undercut by the lingering smoke from the midday fire, remnants of a gathering that had shifted from celebration to strategy. Maps lay crumpled on the crates inside, marked with hasty lines tracing Victor Kane's shadowed empire, the old mill as a hub, backroad drops for illicit hauls, and whispers of a payoff to keep the sheriff's gaze averted. Jacob Thorne emerged from the barn's dim interior, his boots crunching gravel, a rolled-up jacket slung over one arm. His face, lined by years of sun and sorrow, held a tension that pulled at the corners of his mouth. Ryan followed, wiping grease from his hands on a rag, his bulk casting a long shadow that merged with Jacob's. "Scouts confirm it," Ryan said, voice low and edged with gravel. "Kane's holed up at the mill tonight, moving crates. Looks like protection money rerouted from the diner strip. Your girl's place included." He nodded toward Emily, respect flickering in his eyes. They knew her shift, planned to send a message after the alley. Emily's stomach tightened, the words landing like a skid on wet pavement. The diner, her anchor, where she'd slung plates and poured coffee to stitch together a life from fragments. Her father's ghost lingered there too, in the empty stool where he'd nursed regrets before vanishing into the night. "They think a few threats will break me," she murmured, more to herself than the men. But the fear was real, coiling cold in her chest, mingling with the warmth of the club's embrace. Duke whined, pressing against her leg, his fur a soft anchor against the rising storm. Jacob stopped beside her, the scent of leather and faint cologne cutting through the evening chill. "Won't break you, but we end this clean. No blades, no brawls. We show up, lay the truth bare, witnesses, roots, the whole chain. Cain's built on fear, we dismantle it with light." His hand hovered near hers, not quite touching, a gesture heavy with the unspoken vow he'd renewed at dawn. The iron vow wasn't about conquest, it was redemption's engine, veterans like him, piecing honor from the wreckage of wars that left scars deeper than skin. Emily's stand had reignited that fire, pulling him from solitary miles back into the fold. But doubt gnawed. Could they protect without becoming the monsters they hunted? Samuel approached from the tree line, his silver beard glowing in the fading light, a lantern swinging from his gnarled fist. "Riders are gearing up. 20 of us for the mill. Enough presence without overwhelming. The rest hold the flanks, eyes on the sheriff's moves." His voice carried the cadence of old tales, steady as a heartbeat. He'd lost a son to similar shadows years back, a promise unkept that still echoed in his rides. Now he saw in Emily a chance to rewrite that ending, to forge family from the fractures. The convoy assembled under the emerging stars, engines coughing to life in a staggered roar that vibrated through the ground like a gathering pulse. Emily mounted behind Jacob once more, her arms wrapping his waist, the vibration of the Harley traveling up her spine, a rhythm that drowned the ache in her side. Duke's sidecar rattled beside them, the dog's eyes bright with instinctive loyalty. They led the pack along winding back roads, tires whispering over cracked asphalt, the forest closing in like silent witnesses. Moonlight filtered through the canopy, dappling the path in silver, turning the ride into a nocturnal pilgrimage toward reckoning. The old mill loomed on the river's edge, its silhouette a hulking relic of rusted girders and boarded windows, the water below murmuring secrets to the night. Floodlights pierced the darkness from within, casting harsh beams on stacked crates and figures milling like ants in the glow. Victor Cain stood at the center, a wiry man in his 40s with a predator's slouch, his face half-lit to reveal eyes sharp as shattered glass. He'd been Jacob's shadow in the sands once, a brother in arms who traded oaths for opportunity after the dust settled. Now his crew, 6 shadows including the scarred leader from the alley, hauled burdens under his barked orders, oblivious to the approaching thunder. The bikes crested the rise, headlights slicing the gloom like accusations. Engines cut in unison, the silence that followed heavier than any shout. Jacob dismounted first, his boots hitting dirt with purposeful weight, the riders fanning out in a loose arc. Leather-clad sentinels, hands open but stances unyielding. Emily stayed close, Duke at her side, the cool river breeze carrying the tang of damp stone and tension. Cain straightened, his smirk fading as recognition dawned. "Thorn, crawling back from your ghost rides, and with the whole circus." His gaze slid to Emily, lingering on her bandages with mock sympathy. "Heard your stray bit off more than she could chew. Alley lessons stick, don't they?" Jacob stepped forward, voice even as polished steel. "Lessons end tonight, Vic. We know the mill runs, the diner shakes. Emily's not alone anymore." He gestured to the folder in Ryan's grip, more evidence gleaned from club whispers. Ledgers, sketched from overheard deals, timestamps aligning with the alley's shadows. Samuel lit the lantern, its flame steadying the scene, illuminating faces etched with resolve. The scarred leader shifted uneasily, his hand twitching toward a pocket, but Ryan's presence, a mountain of quiet threat, pinned him. Emily met Cain's stare, her voice cutting clear. "You prey on the quiet ones, but promises hold stronger. We're here to witness, not war. Turn it over to the light." Cain's laugh was brittle, echoing off the mill's walls, but cracks showed. sweat beading despite the chill, eyes darting to the river's escape. You think badges care? This town's wired my way. Yet the weight of 100 souls' echo pressed in. The club's network a web he'd underestimated. No fists flew. Instead, truths unfurled like road maps, exposing the rot without a drop spilled. As sirens wailed faintly from town, the sheriff's reluctant response, spurred by the earlier stand, Kane's crew faltered, crates abandoned in the dirt. Jacob's vow pulsed in the air, loyalty as the unbreaking chain, redemption not in ruin, but in revelation. Emily felt it settle in her bones, the family's chosen bonds weaving tighter against the night. But as the lights of authority crested the hill, a deeper shadow stirred. Kane's whisper to a lingering figure, a promise of retaliation veiled in the dark. The ride home would carry new weights, ethical forks, where honor demanded choices sharper than any blade. If this chapter stirred something in you, hit that like button below. Your support keeps these tales of quiet courage rolling. The river's murmur swelled into a low growl as the sheriff's cruisers crested the hill, their red and blue lights fracturing the night like shattered promises. Dust billowed from their tires, swirling in the beams that swept across the old mill's yard, illuminating the abandoned crates and the tense knot of figures frozen in the glare. Victor Kane's smirk twisted into a snarl, his wiry frame tensing as he backed toward the shadows of the loading dock, the scarred leader and his crew scattering like leaves in a sudden gust. The air hung heavy with the metallic tang of the water and the acrid bite of fear sweat, undercut by the faint, oily residue of the club's idling bikes. Engines silenced but ready, a coiled serpent waiting to uncoil. Jacob Thorne stood unmoving, his boots rooted in the gravel, the lantern's glow carving deep lines across his face. Ryan flanked him, arms crossed over his broad chest, a silent bulwark against the encroaching chaos. Emily Harper gripped Duke's collar tighter, the dog's low rumble vibrating through her palm, his warmth a steady pulse against the chill seeping from the river. The vest on her shoulders felt like armor now, its leather creaking softly with each breath, the iron fist patch a talisman against the unfolding storm. She'd come here expecting closure, a quiet unraveling of the threads that had bound her to the alley's violence, but the night whispered of deeper fractures, loyalties tested, vows on the edge of breaking. Sheriff Harlan Brooks stepped from the lead cruiser, his silhouette broad and authoritative under the floodlights, badge catching the strobe like a reluctant star. Two deputies fanned out behind him, hands hovering near holsters, eyes darting from the bikers to Kane's retreating form. "Everyone freeze!" Brooks barked, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife through fog. The mill's rusted beams echoed it back, amplifying the command into something almost theatrical. He scanned the scene, gaze lingering on the scattered evidence, the folder of sketches and timelines clutched in Ryan's fist, the crates stamped with faded markings that screamed illicit trade. "Thorne, what the hell is this? I said I'd handle it." Jacob met the sheriff's eyes, unflinching, the weight of old histories pressing between them like an unspoken accusation. Brooks had been a fixture in Milford for decades, his uniform a shield against the town's undercurrents. But whispers in the club's network painted him as complicit, small favors turning to blind eyes, a pension chased at the cost of justice. "Handling it means showing up, Harlan. Kane's been bleeding the town dry, diners, farms, strays like Emily here. We brought the map. You walk it in." He nodded toward the folder, its pages rustling in the breeze. Each line a testament to nights pieced together from bar talks and road watches. Emily stepped forward, her sneakers crunching on loose stones, the pull of her stitches a sharp reminder of the cost. Duke stayed glued to her side, his notched ear silhouetted against the lights. "They came for me tonight," she said, her voice clear and unyielding, carrying over the deputy's murmurs. "After the alley, thought I'd fold quiet." The words hung, raw and unfiltered, stirring a ripple through the riders, nods of solidarity, the subtle shift of boots on gravel. Samuel lit another lantern from his pocket, its flames steadying her shadow, a quiet ritual that bound the group like invisible chains. Kane emerged from the dock's gloom, hands raised in mock surrender, but his eyes gleamed with the cunning of a cornered fox. "Sheriff, these road rats are fabricating. I run a legit salvage op here, scrap from the river runs. No shakes, no threats." His voice dripped oil, smooth but slick, glancing at the scarred leader who'd melted into the crew. But the lie cracked under the weight of the evidence. One deputy knelt by a crate, prying the lid to reveal bundled cash and ledgers stained with river mud, proof of the extortion web that snaked through Milford's veins. Brooks snatched the folder from Ryan, flipping through it under the cruiser's dome light, his mustache twitching as connections snapped into place. The sheriff's face hardened, a flicker of shame crossing his features before resolve took hold. "Kane, you're under arrest, interfering with an investigation. Conspiracy, we'll sort the charges." Deputies moved in, cuffs glinting as they secured the crew, the scarred man's face paling under the scar as he was led to a cruiser. No resistance, just the hollow clink of metal on wrists, the night's tension uncoiling into procedural rhythm. Yet as Kane was shoved toward the back seat, he twisted, locking eyes with Jacob over the door's edge. "This ain't over, brother," he hissed, low enough for only the front line to hear, the words laced with venom from their shared past. "You think a vow fixes the desert's debts? I'll bury your little family yet." The door slammed, but the threat lingered like exhaust in still air, a shadow promising retaliation beyond bars. Jacob's jaw clenched, the tattoos on his knuckles whitening as fists balled. Redemption's price, the echo of broken oaths from sandy graves. The riders watched the cruisers pull away, taillights fading into the river's bend, the mill yard emptying like a stage after the final act. Emily exhaled, the knot in her chest loosening, but not fully. Kane's whisper had planted seeds of doubt, ethical thorns that pricked at the vow's core. Was justice a single ride or an endless highway? Jacob turned to her, his hand brushing her arm, grounding. "We did right. No blood, just truth. But eyes open, the road twists." Samuel doused the lanterns one by one, the flames hissing out like sealed secrets. The convoy reformed under the stars, engines firing in a staggered chorus that rumbled through the valley, a victory lap tempered by vigilance. Emily mounted behind Jacob, Duke's sidecar humming beside, the wind rising cool and cleansing as they carved back toward the barn. Moonlight silvered the treetops, casting the path in ethereal glow, but beneath it, dilemmas brewed. The sheriff's fragile alliance, Kane's network's reach, the personal scars that bound them all. Back at the sanctuary of weathered timbers, the remaining riders gathered around a fresh fire, embers from earlier glowing like watchful eyes. Ryan recounted the mill's unraveling in low tones, laughter punctuating the relief, but Jacob pulled Emily aside to the porch's edge, where crickets chorused in the underbrush. "Victor's got ties deeper than we mapped," he admitted, voice gravel-soft. "Old war ghosts. But the club's your shield now, chosen kin, unbreakable." She nodded, leaning into the rail, the night's events etching new lines on her soul. Loyalty wasn't a straight ride, it was the curve that tested the frame. As the fire died to coals, plans whispered for dawn watches, scouts on the borders, alibis woven tight. Emily stroked Duke's fur, the dog's trust a mirror to her own budding faith. The vow pulsed alive, a moral compass against corruption's pull, but the horizon hinted at storms. Kane's retaliation, perhaps aimed at the club's fringes, forcing choices between honor and survival. In the quiet, redemption flickered, not in triumph's roar, but in the steady hum of engines waiting for the next turn. The first light of dawn filtered through the barn's slats like hesitant fingers, painting the wooden floor in pale gold stripes that chased away the night's lingering chill. Emily Harper stirred from a fitful sleep on a cot in the corner, the wool blanket slipping from her shoulders, carrying the faint scent of smoke and earth. Her bandaged wounds ached with a dull insistence, a reminder of the alley's fury and the mill's tense standoff. But the pain felt distant now, muffled by the warmth of chosen bonds. Duke lay curled at her feet, his breathing steady, the notched ear twitching in dreams of open roads. Outside, the low murmur of voices rose with the coffee brewing over a fresh fire, riders shaking off the dew, vests zipped against the crisp air, engines tested with throaty revs that echoed like waking promises. Jacob Thorne stood by the open door, silhouetted against the rising sun, his broad frame a pillar in the shifting light. He'd barely slept, his mind replaying Kane's hissed threat from the mill yard, the venom of old betrayals surfacing like oil in rainwater. The Iron Vow Club had faced shadows before, corrupt officials, rival crews, the ghosts of wars that left brothers buried in foreign sands. But this felt personal, a fracture in the vow he'd sworn under desert stars, to protect without compromise, to redeem through loyalty rather than loss. He sipped black coffee from a tin mug, steam curling upward as Ryan approached, his heavy steps crunching the gravel. "Scouts radioed in at first light," Ryan said, voice a low rumble. "Kane's locked up tight in county, but his whispers are out. Word to fringe players in the border towns. They're sniffing for weak spots, testing if we'll scatter." Emily rose, folding the blanket with careful movements, the vest's leather creaking softly. She joined them at the threshold, the morning breeze tugging at her hair, carrying the sharp tang of pine and distant river. Duke trotted to Jacob's side, nuzzling his leg as if sensing the undercurrent. "Testing us," she echoed, her eyes meeting Jacob's, clear now, forged in the fire of the previous night. The mill's unraveling had been a victory of sorts, crates seized, Kane's crew in cuffs. The sheriff's facade cracked under the weight of unignorable truth. But justice in Milford was a fragile thing, woven from half-truths and overlooked corners. Her own life had taught her that. Father lost to the system's blind alleys. Mother faded into silence. Stepping into the club's fold had been a leap, but it anchored her, turning isolation into unbreakable chain. Samuel emerged from the tree line, lantern extinguished, but his presence steady as ever, silver beard glinting in the sun. He carried a worn map under his arm, edges frayed from countless rides. "We fortify without fangs," he advised, joining the circle. The elder's words carried the rhythm of campfires past, tales of stands that bent the world without breaking it. Patrols on the diner routes, eyes on the sheriff's comings and goings. No confrontation, just presence. Let the vow speak louder than threats. The group nodded, the fire's embers popping softly as coffee was poured into shared mugs, the ritual binding them like oaths renewed. By mid-morning, the convoy split into measured waves, 20 bikes rolling toward Milford's edges, chrome flashing under the climbing sun. Emily rode with Jacob again, the Harley's vibration a familiar hum through her core, Duke's sidecar bouncing lightly over the uneven road. The pines blurred into a green haze, the air alive with the scent of wildflowers and warm asphalt. They paused at overlooks, scouts relaying updates via crackling radios, no overt moves from Kane's remnants, but subtle shifts. A truck lingering too long near the diner, shadows in the old mill's ruins. Tension coiled like a spring, ethical dilemmas whispering, how far to push without crossing into the corruption they despised. Jacob's grip tightened on the handlebars, his mind flashing to his brother's last letter, tucked in his saddlebag, words of unbreakable loyalty that had pulled him back from solitary exile. At the diner, Emily dismounted first, the bell above the door jingling like a tentative welcome. The place hummed with midday traffic, plates clattering, coffee percolating. the sizzle of bacon underscoring conversations that hushed at the sight of the riders outside. Her boss, a stout woman named Grace with flour-dusted apron, pulled her into a quick hug. "Heard the rumble last night? You all right, kid?" Emily nodded, sliding behind the counter, the routine grounding her, the pour of steaming joe, the wipe of sticky surfaces. But now, two club members lingered at a corner booth, not intrusive but watchful, their presence a shield against the unknown. Cain's web had touched here, demands for protection fees that squeezed the life from small dreams, no more. The vow ensured that. As the sun arced toward afternoon, word came over the radio. A break. One of Cain's fringe runners, a nervous kid with a guilty conscience, had walked into the sheriff's office, spilling details of the extortion chain. Brooks, cornered by the accumulating truth, coordinated raids on the border drops, his earlier reluctance hardening into action. The sheriff's cruiser passed the convoy on the return leg, a nod through the window, acknowledging the shift. No alliance spoken, but respect earned in the balance of power restored. Back at the barn by dusk, the full club reassembled, the fire roaring anew under a canopy of stars. Laughter mingled with relief. Guitars strumming ballads of roads redeemed. Jacob raised a mug in toast, his voice gravel steady. To Emily, for igniting the vow. To us, for holding it. Eyes turned to her, the circle closing warm and inclusive. She stood taller, Duke at her side, the scars on her body fading against the deeper healing of belonging. Cain's threat lingered, a distant echo, but the iron vow was resilient. Family chosen in the crucible of crisis, promises enduring beyond the horizon. In the quiet that followed, as embers glowed like steadfast hearts, Emily felt the weight lift fully. Redemption wasn't a single roar. It was the endless ride, loyalty's engine carrying them through twists unseen. The night wrapped gentle, the hum of idling bikes a lullaby of honor unbroken. Thank you for riding this journey with us. If these tales of quiet courage and unbreakable bonds touch your soul, subscribe for more stories from the open road. We'll keep the engines running.